My wife said she was at her parents' house. Her parents confirmed it. Every weekend for 6 months, like clockwork, Noelle would pack her overnight bag on Friday evening and announce she was heading to see Judith and Walter Harmon. And every single time I called to check in, her mother would answer with that same sweet voice. "Oh, yes, Graham, she's right here. Just stepped out to the garden, but I'll tell her you called. I'm Graham Tate, 40 years old, and I work in IT security for a mid-sized insurance company. Not the most exciting profession, but it pays well and keeps our suburban life comfortable. At least, I thought it did. Turns out, when you spend your days protecting other people's data from threats, you miss the biggest threat infiltrating your own home. Our neighborhood in Millfield Heights is the kind of place where everyone knows everyone else's business, or thinks they do. Tree-lined streets, manicured lawns, and enough gossip to fuel a reality show. Noelle thrived in this environment. She was a successful real estate broker, the kind of woman who could sell a condemned house to a safety inspector. Charming, persuasive, and apparently a master of deception. The pattern started innocently enough. "Dad's been having some health issues," she'd explain, adjusting her makeup in the hallway mirror. "Mom needs the support." Being the dutiful husband, I encouraged these visits. Family comes first, right? Besides, it gave me time to catch up on work, maybe watch a game without commentary about how sports are mindless entertainment for men avoiding real conversations. Judith Harmon, my mother-in-law, had always been protective of Noelle. Some might say obsessively so. She treated her 37-year-old daughter like a precious artifact that needed constant care and attention. Walter, Noelle's father, was more laid back but equally devoted. They lived in a sprawling colonial about an hour away, complete with a circular driveway and enough guest rooms to house a small army. Every Friday, Noelle would drive off in her silver BMW, promising to be back Sunday evening. Every Saturday, I'd call around dinner time to check in. Every time, Judith would answer with variations of the same story. Noelle was there, but temporarily unavailable. In the shower, running errands, helping with dinner, taking a walk. Always just out of reach, but definitely, absolutely there. The first few months, I didn't think twice about it. Noelle had always been close to her parents, especially after her father's minor heart scare the previous year. If she wanted to spend weekends playing dutiful daughter, who was I to complain? I had my own projects to work on, and honestly, the quiet house was sometimes a relief. But something started nagging at me around month 4. Little things that didn't quite add up. Like how Noelle would return from these family weekends looking more refreshed than relaxed. How she'd developed a sudden interest in new lingerie, claiming she was treating herself. How she'd started taking her phone everywhere, even to the bathroom, and would angle the screen away when texting. Then there were the financial irregularities, cash withdrawals from our joint account that she'd explain away as helping mom with groceries or gas money for all the driving. When I suggested she use her credit card instead, she'd wave me off with some excuse about her parents preferring cash transactions. The neighborhood gossip mill didn't help my growing suspicions. At the Hendersons' barbecue in July, Simone Mitchell, the unofficial mayor of Millfield Heights rumor network, made a comment that stuck with me. "Marriage is all about trust," she'd said, refilling her wine glass. "Some couples have arrangements. Open communication, you know." She'd glanced at Noelle with what I thought was a knowing look, but Noelle just laughed it off. Tiffany Walsh, Noelle's closest friend and Simone's partner in gossip, had chimed in with her own observation. Some women need space to rediscover themselves. Weekend getaways can be so rejuvenating. Again, that look. Again, Noelle's casual dismissal. I started paying closer attention to these weekend departures. Noelle would spend extra time getting ready, choosing outfits that seemed too nice for family dinners. She'd pack more clothes than necessary for a simple overnight stay, and she'd developed a habit of checking her appearance one final time in the car's rearview mirror before backing out of the driveway. The breaking point came on a Saturday in August. I'd called the Harmon house around 7, expecting the usual routine, but this time something was different. I could hear music in the background, jazz, not the classical pieces Judith usually preferred. There was laughter too, male laughter that didn't sound like Walter's raspy chuckle. "Is Noelle available?" I'd asked, trying to keep my voice casual. "Oh, she's just stepped out for groceries," Judith replied, but there was a strain in her voice I'd never heard before. "You know how she likes to help with the shopping." "At 7 in the evening?" A pause. "The store stays open late on Saturdays." After hanging up, I sat in my home office staring at the phone. Something was wrong, very wrong, but I couldn't put my finger on exactly what. The conversation had followed the usual script, but the background noise, Judith's tone, the timing, it all felt off. That night, I did something I'd never done before. I drove to the Harmon house. The trip took 53 minutes, and with every mile, I felt more foolish. What was I doing? Spying on my own wife? Checking up on her like some paranoid husband from a bad movie? But I couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had shifted in my marriage, and I needed to know what. The Harmon house was dark when I arrived, except for a single light in what I knew was the kitchen window. Noelle's BMW was nowhere to be seen. I parked across the street and waited, feeling like a stalker. 20 minutes passed, then 30. No sign of my wife returning from her grocery run. I drove home that night with more questions than answers, but I didn't confront Noelle when she returned Sunday evening. Instead, I watched. I listened. I started paying attention to details I'd previously ignored. Like the new perfume she'd started wearing, something expensive and sultry that was nothing like her usual floral scents. Like how she'd begun working out more frequently, claiming she wanted to feel good about herself. Like the way she'd started doing her hair differently, more sophisticated somehow. The phone calls continued every Saturday. The same routine, the same explanations, the same carefully orchestrated responses from Judith. But now I was listening for inconsistencies, and I was starting to find them. 2 weeks after my midnight drive, I decided to test the system. I called the Harmon house on a Saturday morning, much earlier than usual. Walter answered. "Graham, how are you, son?" "I'm good, Walter. Is Noelle around?" "Noelle? She's not here yet. Thought she was coming this afternoon." My heart started racing. "This afternoon?" "Yeah, Judith's expecting her around 3. Did she leave already?" I glanced at the clock. It was 10:30, and Noelle had left Friday evening as usual. No, I must have gotten confused about the timing. Tell her I called when she gets there." After hanging up, I sat in my kitchen trying to process what I'd just learned. Noelle had left Friday night, supposedly to spend the weekend with her parents. But according to Walter, she wasn't expected until Saturday afternoon. So where had she spent Friday night? And where was she now? The pieces of a puzzle I didn't want to solve were starting to fall into place. The weekend absences, the improved appearance, the secretive behavior, the financial irregularities. It all pointed to one conclusion I wasn't ready to accept. My wife was having an affair. But the complexity of the deception was what really staggered me. This wasn't some sloppy emotional betrayal. This was a carefully orchestrated system involving her parents as unwitting accomplices. Or were they unwitting? Judith's consistent stories about Noelle being there but unavailable suggested a level of coordination that went beyond simple misunderstanding. I spent the rest of that Saturday in a daze, mechanically going through the motions of weekend chores while my mind raced through possibilities. When Noelle returned Sunday evening, she seemed relaxed and happy, chattering about her mother's new recipe and her father's improving health. She kissed me on the cheek and asked about my weekend as if nothing had changed. But everything had changed. The foundation of trust that our marriage was built on had developed a crack, and I could feel it widening with every passing moment. That night, lying in bed next to my wife, I made a decision. I was going to find out the truth. All of it. No matter how much it might hurt, I needed to know what was really happening during those weekend visits to her parents' house. I just had no idea how devastating that truth would turn out to be. 3 weeks passed before I got my answer, and it came from the last person I expected. I was working late in my home office on a Tuesday evening, debugging a security protocol that had been giving me headaches all week, when my phone rang. The number wasn't in my contacts, but the area code was local. Hello? Is this Graham Tate? The voice was female, unfamiliar, and carried an edge I couldn't quite identify. Yes, this is Graham. My name is Patricia Caldwell. I think we need to talk. The name meant nothing to me, but something in her tone made me save my work and give her my full attention. What can I help you with, Patricia? It's about your wife and my husband. The room seemed to shift around me. I gripped the phone tighter. I'm sorry, what? Dennis Caldwell. Does that name ring a bell? It did. Dennis had been Noelle's boyfriend before we met, back in college. They'd dated for 2 years before breaking up, and she'd mentioned him occasionally in the early days of our relationship. But that was 15 years ago. Ancient history. I know who Dennis is, I said carefully, but I'm not sure why you're calling me about him. Patricia's laugh was bitter. Because he's been seeing your wife every weekend for the past 6 months, every single time she tells you she's visiting her parents. The words hit me like a physical blow. I'd suspected an affair, but hearing it confirmed, with details, made it real in a way that left me struggling to breathe. How do you know this? I managed. Because I've been tracking his movements. Dennis thinks he's clever, but he's always been terrible at covering his tracks. He leaves every Friday evening, tells me he's going to visit his sick aunt in Riverside, returns Sunday night with stories about hospital visits and family dinners. Except, his aunt has been healthy as a horse for years. I found myself taking notes, my IT background kicking in automatically. You have proof? Credit card receipts from restaurants in your area, hotel charges, even a few photos I took when I followed him one weekend. Her voice was steady now, businesslike. Your wife's car was in the parking lot of the Grandview Inn every time. The Grandview Inn? I knew it well. A boutique hotel about 20 minutes from the Harmon house. Noelle had mentioned it favorably several times, calling it charming and romantic. Now I knew why. Why are you telling me this? I asked. Because I'm done being made a fool of, and because I figure you deserve to know what your wife and my husband have been up to. Patricia paused. Also, because I think we can help each other. Help each other how? By getting the truth, all of it. These aren't just simple affairs, Graham. There's a whole system in place. Your mother-in-law is part of it. That stopped me cold. What do you mean? I mean Judith Harmon has been providing cover for them. Dennis parks in their driveway. She lets him in through the back door. When you call, Noelle is there, just not alone, and not for the reasons you think. The room was spinning now. My mother-in-law, the woman who'd welcomed me into the family, who'd insisted I call her mom, was actively participating in my wife's deception. The weekend phone calls, the careful explanations, the consistent stories, it was all coordinated. I need to see your evidence, I said. I was hoping you'd say that. Can you meet tomorrow evening? There's a coffee shop called Brewster's on 5th Street, 7 o'clock? I agreed, and after hanging up, I sat in my office for a long time, staring at the wall. My suspicions had been confirmed, but the reality was worse than I'd imagined. This wasn't just about Noelle having an affair. This was about an entire network of people conspiring to deceive me, including members of her family. The next evening, I arrived at Brewster's 15 minutes early and claimed a corner table where we could talk privately. Patricia Caldwell turned out to be a woman in her late 30s with short brown hair and tired eyes. She was still attractive, but there was a hardness around the edges that spoke of recent disillusionment. "Thank you for meeting me," she said, sliding into the seat across from me. She carried a manila folder that she placed on the table between us. "Thank you for calling." I've been suspecting something for weeks, but I couldn't prove it. Patricia opened the folder and spread its contents across the table. Credit card statements, printed emails, photographs, and what looked like a hand-drawn timeline. The evidence was comprehensive and damning. "Dennis has been sloppy," she explained, pointing to a restaurant receipt. "Dinner for two at Romano's, the same night he told me he was visiting his aunt. And look at this." She showed me a photo taken from a distance. Dennis's red Mustang parked in the Harmon driveway, partially hidden behind some landscaping. "When was this taken?" 3 weeks ago. I followed him that Saturday, parked down the street and waited. Your wife arrived about an hour after he did. They went inside together, and I didn't see either of them again until Sunday morning." I studied the photographs, my anger building with each image. There was Dennis, looking older but still recognizable, walking up to the Harmon's front door. There was Noelle's BMW pulling into the driveway. There was Judith Harmon herself, opening the door and embracing Dennis like he was a beloved family member. "She knows," I said, pointing to the photo of Judith. "My mother-in-law knows exactly what's happening. More than knows, she's facilitating it. I've watched her routine. She goes to the grocery store every Friday afternoon, stocks up like she's feeding a family reunion. Then she stays home all weekend, providing cover and probably cooking meals for the happy couple." The betrayal was multifaceted and complete. Not only was my wife cheating on me, but she'd enlisted her mother to help orchestrate the deception. Every phone call, every reassurance, every "she just stepped out" had been a carefully planned lie. "What do you want to do about it?" Patricia asked. I looked at the evidence spread across the table, thinking about the past 6 months of weekend absences, the growing distance in my marriage, the elaborate system of deception that had made me question my own instincts. "I want to expose all of it," I said. "Not just the affair, but the whole network. I want everyone who participated in this to face consequences." Patricia smiled for the first time since I'd met her. "I was hoping you'd say that." We spent the next hour planning our approach. Patricia had already gathered substantial evidence on Dennis, but we needed more proof of the broader conspiracy. The hotel records, the coordination with Judith, the timeline of deceptions, we needed it all documented and undeniable. "I have an idea," I said as we prepared to leave, "but it's going to require perfect timing and a bit of risk." "I'm listening." "This Sunday is Walter's birthday. Noelle mentioned they're having a family dinner to celebrate. What if we both showed up uninvited?" Patricia's eyes lit up. "Catch them all together." "Exactly. No more speculation, no more wondering. We walk in and confront the entire system at once." "What about evidence? We need to document whatever we find." I pulled out my phone. "I'll record everything. Audio, video, whatever I can capture. By the time we're done, there won't be any doubt about what's been happening." We exchanged contact information and agreed to coordinate our approach for Sunday. As I drove home that night, I felt a strange mixture of dread and anticipation. The truth was finally within reach, but I knew that once I had it, there would be no going back. My marriage, my relationship with Noelle's family, my entire understanding of the past 6 months, it was all about to change forever. When I got home, Noelle was already in bed, reading a magazine. She looked up and smiled as I entered the bedroom. "How was your evening?" she asked casually. "Productive," I replied, which was true in ways she couldn't imagine. "Good. Oh, I meant to tell you. I'll be going to Mom and Dad's this weekend for Dad's birthday dinner. Should be a nice family celebration." I nodded, keeping my expression neutral. "That sounds lovely. Tell them I said happy birthday." "I will." She returned to her magazine, completely unaware that her carefully constructed world was about to come crashing down. As I got ready for bed, I thought about Patricia's evidence, about the hotel receipts and the photographs, about the systematic deception that had been playing out under my nose for months. But mostly, I thought about Sunday dinner and the confrontation that would finally bring everything into the light. The alibi house was about to lose its most important function. Sunday arrived with the kind of crisp October weather that makes everything seem sharper, more defined. Appropriate, I thought, for a day when clarity would finally replace confusion. Noelle left Friday evening as usual, kissing me goodbye and promising to give her father my birthday wishes. I watched her drive away, knowing it would likely be the last time she'd leave for a family weekend without me knowing exactly where she was going and who she'd be with. Patricia and I had spent the week coordinating our plan. She'd gathered additional evidence, more photographs, a detailed timeline, even a recording of Dennis lying to her about his weekend plans. I'd prepared my own materials, printed bank statements showing Noelle's cash withdrawals, screenshots of her evasive text messages, and a small digital recorder I planned to use during the confrontation. Saturday passed slowly. I cleaned the house, did laundry, and tried to focus on normal activities while my mind raced through possible scenarios for the next day. Part of me hoped we were wrong, that there would be some innocent explanation for everything we'd discovered. But the rational part of my mind knew better. The evidence was too comprehensive, the pattern too consistent. Sunday morning, I dressed carefully in my best suit, the navy one Noelle had helped me pick out for her company's awards dinner last year. If I was going to confront my wife's affair and her family's complicity, I wanted to look like someone who deserved respect and honesty. The drive to the Harmon house took an hour, giving me plenty of time to rehearse what I planned to say. But as I turned into their circular driveway at exactly 3 o'clock, all my prepared speeches evaporated. There, parked beside Noelle's BMW, was a red Mustang convertible. Dennis was here, just as Patricia had predicted. I parked behind the Mustang, effectively blocking it in, and sat for a moment collecting myself. Through the large front windows, I could see movement inside, people gathering around what looked like a dining room table. A family birthday celebration, exactly as advertised. Except the family had gained an extra member. My phone buzzed with a text from Patricia. "In position. Dennis's car is there?" I responded, "Yes. Going in now." The front door was unlocked, as it always was during family gatherings. I walked in without knocking, my footsteps muffled by the thick Persian rug in the foyer. Voices and laughter drifted from the dining room, along with the scent of Judith's famous pot roast. I paused at the dining room entrance, taking in the scene. Walter sat at the head of the table, looking genuinely happy as he opened birthday cards. Judith bustled around serving food, playing the perfect hostess. Noelle sat to Walter's right, radiant in a blue dress I'd never seen before. And there, sitting across from my wife like he belonged there, was Dennis Caldwell. He was older than in the photos Noelle had shown me years ago, his dark hair now touched with gray, but he still had the easy confidence that had probably attracted her in college. He was laughing at something Walter had said, completely comfortable in what should have been a family-only gathering. "Hello, everyone," I said, stepping into the room. The effect was immediate and dramatic. Noelle's fork clattered against her plate. Judith dropped the serving spoon she'd been holding. Walter looked confused but pleased to see me. And Dennis went pale and started to stand. "Graham!" Noelle recovered first, her voice bright with forced cheer. "What a surprise! I thought you were working on that project this weekend." "I finished early," I said, my voice steady. "I hope you don't mind me crashing the birthday celebration." "Of course not," Walter boomed, gesturing to an empty chair. "The more the merrier. Judith, set another place for Graham." Judith hadn't moved. She stood frozen beside the table, the color draining from her face as she realized what my unexpected arrival meant. "I don't think we've met," I said, extending my hand toward Dennis. "I'm Graham Tate, Noelle's husband." Dennis had no choice but to shake my hand. His palm was sweaty. "Dennis Caldwell, I'm an old friend of Noelle's." "Old friend," I repeated, as if considering the phrase. "How nice that you could join the family celebration. Do you often spend weekends here?" The silence that followed was deafening. Noelle was staring at me with a mixture of panic and calculation. Judith had finally moved, but only to grip the back of Walter's chair for support. Walter himself looked confused by the sudden tension in the room. "Actually," I continued, reaching into my jacket pocket, "I brought something to share with everyone." I pulled out the manila envelope I'd prepared. Some interesting photographs and documents that I think the whole family should see. "Graham," Noelle said quickly, "maybe we should talk privately." "No," I interrupted, opening the envelope. "I think this is exactly the right time and place for this conversation." I began laying photographs on the table, right next to the birthday cake. "These were taken over the past few weeks. Dennis, you might recognize your car in the driveway." The first photo showed Dennis's Mustang parked in the exact spot where it sat right now. The second showed him walking up to the front door. The third showed Noelle arriving an hour later. "Graham, please," Judith finally found her voice. "Let's not do this here." "Where would you prefer to do it, Judith? In private, where you can coordinate your stories like you've been doing for 6 months?" I placed another photo on the table, this one showing Judith embracing Dennis at the front door. "You've been quite the gracious hostess, haven't you?" Walter was studying the photographs, his birthday joy evaporating as understanding dawned. "What is this, Judith? What's going on?" "I can explain," Noelle started, but I cut her off. "Please do explain. Explain how you've been spending weekends here with Dennis while telling me you were having quiet family time. Explain how your mother has been answering my phone calls and lying about your whereabouts. Explain how you've been using our joint account to fund these romantic getaways." I pulled out the bank statements next, highlighting the cash withdrawals that coincided with her weekend trips. Then came the hotel receipts Patricia had shared with me, showing charges to Dennis's credit card at the Grandview Inn. "The Grandview Inn," I said, placing the receipts next to the photos. "You always said it was such a charming place. Now I know why." Dennis finally spoke up. "Look, this isn't what it looks like." "Really? Because it looks like you've been having an affair with my wife for 6 months, using her parents' house as your base of operations, while her mother provides alibis and her father remains blissfully unaware." I turned to Walter. "Happy birthday, by the way. Sorry to ruin your party with the truth." Walter was staring at his wife and daughter with an expression I'd never seen before, a mixture of hurt, anger, and disbelief. "Judith, is this true?" Judith's carefully maintained composure finally cracked. "Walter, I can explain. Noelle was unhappy and Dennis—" "You've been lying to me too," Walter said quietly. "All those weekends, all those phone calls from Graham, you've been lying to both of us. I was protecting our daughter. From what? From the consequences of her choices?" Walter's voice was rising now. "From her own marriage?" I pulled out my phone and set it on the table, making sure the recording function was visible. "I want to hear it all. The whole story. How long has this been planned? Who else knows? What was the end game here?" Noelle looked around the table desperately, as if searching for an escape route. "Graham, you don't understand. Our marriage has been what? I've been a good husband. I've supported your career. I've trusted you completely. I've never given you reason to doubt my commitment. So please, enlighten me about what I don't understand." "You've been distant," she said weakly. "Always working, never really present. So you decided to rekindle things with your college boyfriend and turn your parents into accomplices?" Dennis tried to stand again. "Maybe I should leave." "Sit down," I said firmly. "You're not going anywhere until we're finished here." I pulled out the final piece of evidence, a printed timeline showing the correlation between Noelle's weekend absences, Dennis's lies to his wife, and the various financial transactions that had funded their affair. 6 months, I said, spreading the timeline across the table. 26 weekends of systematic deception. 26 times you looked me in the eye and lied. 26 times your mother answered my calls and participated in the charade. The room was completely silent now, except for the ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner. Everyone was staring at the evidence laid out on the table like pieces of a jigsaw puzzle that finally formed a complete picture. "What happens now?" Noelle asked quietly. I reached into my jacket one final time and pulled out a thick legal document. "Now you get served with divorce papers. I filed them Friday afternoon." I placed the divorce petition in front of her, right next to her untouched birthday cake. "I'm seeking dissolution of marriage based on irreconcilable differences, with a request for full disclosure of all assets, including any money you've spent on this affair." Noelle picked up the papers with shaking hands. "Graham, please, can't we work this out?" "Work what out? The affair? The lies? The fact that your entire family conspired against me?" I stood up, looking around the table at each of them. "There's nothing left to work out." Walter was still staring at the evidence, his birthday celebration forgotten. "Judith, how could you do this? How could you involve yourself in something like this?" "She's our daughter," Judith said desperately. "I was trying to help her find happiness." "By destroying her marriage? By making me complicit in deceiving Graham?" Walter shook his head. "This isn't help, Judith. This is betrayal." I gathered up my evidence, leaving only the divorce papers on the table. "I'll be in touch through my attorney about asset division and property settlement. Dennis, I assume your wife will be hearing from you soon about your own marital situation." As I turned to leave, Noelle called after me. "Graham, wait, please don't do this." I paused at the dining room entrance and looked back at the scene. The birthday celebration turned into a disaster, the family torn apart by secrets and lies, the evidence of deception scattered across the table like confetti. "I'm not doing this, Noelle. You did this. All of you did this. I'm just making sure everyone faces the consequences." I walked out of the Harmon house and drove home, leaving behind 6 months of lies and a marriage that had been over long before I'd realized it was ending. The alibi house had finally served its last lie. The week following the Sunday dinner confrontation was a whirlwind of legal consultations, uncomfortable conversations, and the slow, methodical process of dismantling a 15-year marriage. But it was also the week I discovered just how deep the deception had run, and how many people had been aware of what was happening under my nose. Monday morning, I took a personal day and met with Rebecca Martinez, the divorce attorney I'd consulted the previous week. She reviewed the evidence I'd gathered with Patricia's help and nodded approvingly at the documentation. "This is comprehensive," she said, flipping through the photographs and financial records. "The systematic nature of the deception, the involvement of family members, the financial impact, it all strengthens your position significantly." "What about the house?" I asked. The house was our biggest asset, and I'd been dreading the possibility of having to sell it and split the proceeds. Given that marital funds were used to support the affair, and given the extent of the deception involved, we have a strong argument for you retaining the house, especially if you can demonstrate that she used joint assets to fund the relationship. That afternoon, I received an unexpected visitor. Tiffany Walsh, Noelle's best friend, and one of the neighborhood gossip queens, appeared at my front door with what she probably thought was a conciliatory smile. "Graham, I heard about what happened yesterday. I wanted to check on you." I invited her in, curious about what she really wanted. Tiffany had never shown much interest in my welfare before. "It's been a difficult time," I said, leading her to the living room. "I'm sure you can imagine. Actually, I wanted to talk to you about that." Tiffany settled into the armchair across from me, her expression shifting from sympathetic to calculating. "I think there might be some misunderstanding about what's been happening." "Misunderstanding?" "About Noelle's weekends, about what she's been doing." I studied Tiffany's face, recognizing something I'd seen before but hadn't fully understood. "You knew, didn't you?" "Knew what?" "About Dennis, about the affair, about the whole arrangement." Tiffany's composure slipped slightly. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Really? Because I'm starting to think a lot of people knew what was happening. Those comments at the barbecue about arrangements and open marriages. You weren't just making conversation, were you? Graham, I think you're reading too much into... Who else knew, Tiffany? She was quiet for a long moment, clearly weighing her options. Finally, she sighed. Look, it wasn't my place to say anything. Noelle is my friend, and she was unhappy. She needed support, not judgment. So you provided cover for her affair. I provided friendship. When she needed someone to talk to, someone who wouldn't condemn her for trying to find happiness. By lying to her husband and involving her parents in an elaborate deception? Tiffany stood up abruptly. You're making this sound worse than it was. Noelle never meant to hurt you. She just meant to lie to me indefinitely while having an affair with her ex-boyfriend. It wasn't supposed to go on this long. She was trying to figure out what she wanted. For 6 months? These things are complicated, Graham. Marriage isn't always enough for some people. I walked Tiffany to the door, my mind racing with this new information. Tell me something. How many people in this neighborhood knew what was happening? She hesitated. I don't think that's... How many, Tiffany? A few people suspected something, but no one knew for sure. Except you. Except me, she admitted quietly. After she left, I sat in my living room thinking about the expanding circle of complicity. It wasn't just Noelle, Dennis, and Judith. There had been friends who knew, neighbors who suspected, an entire network of people who had chosen to protect the lie rather than tell me the truth. That evening my phone rang. Patricia Caldwell. How are you holding up? She asked. Still processing everything. You? Same. Dennis moved out today. He's staying at some extended stay hotel while we figure out the divorce details. I'm sorry. Don't be. This has been a long time coming. Patricia paused. I wanted to thank you for yesterday, for having the courage to confront all of them at once. I never would have been able to do that. We did it together. Your evidence made it possible. Still, seeing Dennis's face when you laid out those photographs, it was worth 6 months of suspicion and doubt. We talked for another few minutes about practical matters, lawyers, asset division, the complicated process of untangling lives that had been intertwined for years. But as we were about to hang up, Patricia mentioned something that caught my attention. Oh, I meant to tell you. I ran into Simone Mitchell at the grocery store today. She seemed very interested in how I was doing, considering she's never spoken to me before. Simone Mitchell. The neighborhood gossip queen and Tiffany's partner in information gathering. What did she want? She was asking about Dennis, about how long I'd known about the affair, whether I had any idea it was going on. But the way she asked, it was like she already knew the answers. Another piece of the puzzle clicked into place. Patricia, I think there were more people involved in this than we realized. What do you mean? I told her about Tiffany's visit, about her admission that she'd known about the affair and had provided emotional support for Noelle throughout the 6 months of deception. So there was a whole support network, Patricia said, people helping them maintain the lie. It's starting to look that way. What are you going to do about it? I looked around my living room, the space Noelle and I had decorated together, filled with photos from happier times and furniture we'd chosen as a couple. Soon, it would be just mine, a reminder of what we'd built together and how completely she'd destroyed it. I'm going to make sure everyone who participated in this faces consequences, I said. Not just Noelle and Dennis, but everyone who knew and chose to help them lie. How? I'm not sure yet, but I'm going to figure it out. After hanging up with Patricia, I spent the evening going through old photos and documents, looking for clues I might have missed. What I found was a pattern of small deceptions that predated the affair. Social events where Noelle had claimed to be with friends who later mentioned not seeing her, unexplained expenses that she'd attributed to various causes, changes in routine that she'd explained away with reasonable-sounding excuses. The affair with Dennis might have started 6 months ago, but the foundation for systematic deception had been laid much earlier. Tuesday morning brought another surprise visitor, Walter Harmon. "I hope you don't mind me stopping by," he said when I opened the door. He looked older than he had on Sunday, worn down by the revelations of his wife's and daughter's behavior. "Of course not, Walter. Come in." We sat in the kitchen, and I made coffee while he gathered his thoughts. "I owe you an apology," he said finally. "I had no idea what Judith and Noelle were doing. If I had known—" "I believe you, Walter. You were as much a victim of their deception as I was. I keep thinking about all those phone calls, all the times you called looking for Noelle, and Judith would make up stories about where she was." He shook his head. "I was sitting right there for some of those calls. I never questioned why Noelle was never available to talk. They were careful about it. The system was designed to keep both of us in the dark." "Judith and I are separating," Walter said quietly. "After 42 years of marriage, I can't trust her anymore." "How do you come back from something like this?" I didn't have an answer for him. How do you rebuild trust after discovering that the person you've shared your life with is capable of such elaborate deception? "I'm going to contest the divorce," Walter continued. "I want to make sure Judith faces financial consequences for what she did. She used our resources to support their affair, groceries, utilities, even redecorating the guest room where they stayed. I'm doing the same thing. My attorney thinks we have strong cases." "Good." Walter stood up, looking more determined than when he'd arrived. "They made their choices. Now they get to live with the consequences." After he left, I realized that the Sunday dinner confrontation had been just the beginning. The revelation of the affair had set off a chain reaction that was destroying relationships and exposing secrets throughout our social circle. And I was just getting started. That afternoon, I made a decision that would escalate the situation beyond anything I'd originally planned. I was going to make the whole story public. I spent the evening writing a detailed account of everything that had happened: the systematic deception, the involvement of family and friends, the evidence I'd gathered, the confrontation at Sunday dinner. I included selected photographs and documents, careful to protect privacy while making the facts clear. Then I posted it all on social media. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Comments, messages, phone calls from friends and neighbors who had suspected something but never known the full extent of what was happening. People sharing their own stories of betrayal and deception. Others expressing outrage at the network of people who had chosen to protect the lie. By Thursday, the story had spread beyond our immediate social circle. Local gossip blogs picked it up. The real estate company where Noelle worked was getting calls from clients who'd seen the posts. The private matter of my marriage's dissolution had become a public reckoning with the culture of deception that had enabled it. And I was far from finished. The social media post changed everything. Within 48 hours, what had been a private family matter became the most talked-about scandal in Millfield Heights. But more importantly, it forced other people who had been complicit in the deception to reveal themselves, either through defensive responses or guilty silence. Friday morning, I received a call from someone I hadn't expected to hear from. Lauren Beck, Noelle's assistant at the real estate office. "Mr. Tate? This is Lauren from Prestige Properties. I work with Noelle." "I remember you, Lauren. What can I do for you?" "I saw your post online, and I think we need to talk. There are things you don't know about what's been happening at the office." We agreed to meet at a coffee shop downtown, away from the neighborhood where everyone knew our business. Lauren was a young woman in her mid-20s, ambitious and sharp, the kind of person who noticed details others missed. "I want to start by saying I never felt right about any of this," she said after we'd ordered our drinks. "But Noelle is my boss, and I needed the job." "What exactly did you need to keep quiet about?" Lauren pulled out her phone and showed me a calendar app. "Noelle's been using me to maintain her cover story. Look at this." The calendar showed Noelle's official work schedule: client meetings, property showings, office time. But Lauren had color-coded it to show which appointments were real and which were fabricated. Every Friday for the past 6 months, she'd have me schedule fake client meetings or property inspections that would justify her leaving early. Then I'd cover for her if anyone called the office looking for her. You created fake appointments? Not just fake appointments, fake clients, fake properties, even fake paperwork to make it look legitimate. Lauren scrolled through the calendar. She'd tell you she was visiting her parents, but she'd tell the office she was working. I was supposed to back up whichever story anyone was checking. This was a new level of systematic deception I hadn't considered. Noelle hadn't just been lying to me and using her parents as cover. She'd been manipulating her work environment to create multiple layers of alibis. Why are you telling me this now? Because after your post went viral, the office has been getting calls. Clients asking questions, other agents wanting to know what's going on. Mr. Henderson, that's our broker, he's furious. He's talking about firing Noelle for using company resources to cover up personal business. What kind of resources? Lauren showed me more evidence. Company credit card charges for meals and hotels that were supposedly business-related, but corresponded to Noelle's weekend disappearances. Mileage reimbursements for fake client visits. Even office supplies that had been used to create documentation for non-existent properties. She's been defrauding the company, I realized, for 6 months, and she made me part of it by threatening my job if I didn't cooperate. I thanked Lauren for her courage in coming forward and assured her that I'd make sure her cooperation was known if any legal issues arose from Noelle's workplace deceptions. But as I drove home, I realized that the network of complicity was even larger than I'd imagined. It wasn't just family and friends. Noelle had corrupted her professional environment as well, dragging her assistant into the web of lies and putting her job at risk. That afternoon brought another revelation. Simone Mitchell called, and her tone was very different from her usual gossipy cheerfulness. "Graham, we need to talk. This social media thing has gotten out of hand." "Has it? I thought I was just telling the truth." "You're destroying people's lives with these accusations." "I'm not making accusations, Simone. I'm documenting facts. Would you like to see the evidence?" There was a pause. "I think you're misunderstanding what happened. Yes, some of us knew Noelle was going through a difficult time, but we didn't know the extent." "Stop," I cut her off. "Just stop. I know you knew about Dennis. I know you and Tiffany provided emotional support and probably logistical help. What I want to know is who else was involved." "Graham, you're being paranoid." "Am I?" "Because I'm getting calls from people who are telling me about fake work appointments, fraudulent expense reports, and a whole network of people who chose to protect a lie rather than tell me the truth." Simone was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was smaller, less confident. "It wasn't supposed to hurt you. Noelle said you two were having problems, that you were basically separated already." "We were never separated. We were never having problems that couldn't have been solved with honest conversation. But instead of talking to me, she decided to have an affair and recruit half the neighborhood to help her hide it. She said you wouldn't understand." "Understand what? That she was unhappy? That she wanted something different?" "I would have understood that, Simone. What I don't understand is why everyone thought lying to me was better than giving me a chance to address whatever problems she thought we had." After hanging up with Simone, I realized that the social media post had accomplished something I hadn't expected. It had forced people to reveal their own involvement in the deception by trying to defend or minimize it. Saturday brought the most surprising revelation of all. Dennis Caldwell called me. "We need to talk," he said, without preamble. "I don't think we have anything to discuss." "Actually, we do, because what you posted online isn't the whole story." Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet him at a park near his hotel. I wanted to hear what he thought I was missing. Dennis looked terrible, unshaven, tired, wearing clothes that suggested he'd been sleeping poorly. The confident man I'd confronted at Sunday dinner was gone, replaced by someone who looked genuinely defeated. "I want you to know, I never intended for it to go this far," he said. "How far did you intend for it to go?" "It was supposed to be temporary. A few weekends to figure out if what Noelle and I had was real or just nostalgia." "And you needed 6 months to figure that out?" Dennis sat down heavily on a park bench. "The situation got complicated." "Complicated how?" "Noelle's mother, Judith. She was the one who suggested we use their house. She was the one who coordinated the phone calls and the cover stories." I stared at him. "You're saying this was Judith's idea?" "Not the affair itself, but the system for hiding it. Noelle told her mother she was unhappy in her marriage, and Judith offered to help her explore her options without disrupting the family. By lying to me and Walter. Judith said it was better for everyone if you didn't know, until Noelle was sure about what she wanted. What she wanted was to have an affair while keeping the security of her marriage." Dennis nodded miserably. "That's what it became, and once we were in it, it was hard to stop. The lies kept getting bigger, more people got involved, and it felt like we were in too deep to just end it. So, you decided to keep lying indefinitely. We decided to wait until after the holidays to figure out next steps. Noelle was going to talk to you after New Year's." "About what? Divorce? Or was she planning to keep both relationships going?" "I don't know. I honestly don't know what she was planning." I left Dennis sitting on that park bench, looking like a man who had finally understood the full cost of his choices. But his revelation about Judith's central role in orchestrating the deception added another layer to my understanding of what had happened. This hadn't been a simple affair that spiraled out of control. It had been a calculated campaign of deception, planned and coordinated by my mother-in-law, designed to allow my wife to explore other options while keeping me as a backup plan. Sunday evening, exactly 1 week after the confrontation at the Harmon house, I received a call from Rebecca Martinez, my attorney. "Graham, I've been reviewing the new evidence you've provided, the workplace fraud, the additional witnesses, the expanded timeline of deception. This changes our strategy significantly." "How so?" "We're not just looking at a divorce settlement anymore. We're looking at potential fraud charges, both against the real estate company and potentially against you through the misuse of marital assets. The systematic nature of the deception, the involvement of multiple parties, the falsification of business records, this goes well beyond a simple marital dispute." "What does that mean for the divorce?" "It means we're in a much stronger position to argue for a settlement heavily in your favor. The house, the majority of shared assets, even potential damages for the fraudulent use of marital funds. And for the other people involved? That depends on how far you want to take this. We have evidence of conspiracy to defraud, both you personally and Noelle's employer. If you want to pursue criminal charges, we have enough to make a compelling case." I thought about Walter, sitting in his kitchen talking about 42 years of marriage destroyed by his wife's choices. I thought about Lauren, risking her job to tell me the truth about what had been happening at Noelle's office. I thought about Patricia, who had been living the same lie I had been living, married to someone who was systematically deceiving her. And I thought about the network of people who had known what was happening and had chosen to protect the lie rather than tell me the truth. "Let's pursue everything," I said. "All of it. I want everyone who participated in this to face the full consequences of their choices." The alibi house had been exposed, but the reckoning was just beginning. 3 weeks after my social media post went viral, the consequences were cascading through every aspect of the lives of everyone who had participated in the deception. But Noelle had been surprisingly quiet through it all, making me wonder what she was planning. I got my answer on a Tuesday evening when she showed up at our house, my house now, according to the temporary custody order, carrying a bottle of wine and wearing the kind of smile that had once made me forget whatever I'd been worried about. "Hello, Graham," she said when I opened the door. "I was hoping we could talk." About what? About us. About fixing this mess. I stepped aside to let her in, curious about what approach she was going to take. She walked into the living room like she still belonged there, setting the wine on the coffee table and settling onto the couch where we'd spent countless evenings watching movies together. "I know you're angry," she began, "and you have every right to be. I handled everything badly." "Handled what badly? The affair, the lies, the fraud? Which part are you referring to?" "All of it." She looked up at me with the expression that had always preceded her most persuasive arguments. "But I want you to understand why it happened." "I'm listening." "We'd grown apart, Graham. You have to admit that. You were always working, always focused on your projects, never really present when we were together. So you decided to reconnect with Dennis." "It wasn't planned. I ran into him at a conference in March, and we started talking. It was innocent at first, just catching up, remembering college, talking about how our lives had turned out." "When did it stop being innocent?" Noelle looked down at her hands. "When I realized I felt more alive talking to him for an hour than I'd felt in months of conversations with you." The words stung, but I kept my expression neutral. "So you decided to pursue a relationship with him." "I decided to explore what it might mean, whether what I was feeling was real or just nostalgia. For 6 months. I needed time to figure out what I wanted, while lying to me every single weekend. I was trying to protect you from getting hurt unnecessarily. If it had just been a phase, if I'd worked through whatever I was feeling and come back to our marriage stronger, you never would have had to know." I sat down across from her, studying her face. Even now, even after everything that had been exposed, she was trying to frame the deception as protection rather than betrayal. "What about the fraud at your office? Was that also to protect me?" Her composure slipped slightly. "That was just practical. I needed cover for the time I was spending away, and creating fake appointments was easier than trying to explain. It was theft, Noelle. You stole from your company to fund your affair. I was going to pay it back. With what money? The cash you were withdrawing from our joint account?" She was quiet for a moment, realizing that every justification she offered only highlighted another aspect of the systematic deception. "I want to make this right," she said finally. "I want to fix our marriage." "Our marriage is over." "It doesn't have to be. People work through affairs all the time. We could go to counseling, rebuild trust." "Rebuild trust?" I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Noelle, you didn't just have an affair. You created an entire alternate reality. You involved your parents, your friends, your co-workers. You turned lying to me into a community project. I know it looks bad. It looks bad because it is bad. It's not just about you and Dennis. It's about the fact that you're capable of looking me in the eye every single day for 6 months while orchestrating an elaborate deception. It's about the fact that when you had problems with our marriage, instead of talking to me, you decided to audition my replacement." Noelle's carefully composed expression was starting to crack. "I made mistakes, but I love you, Graham. I've always loved you." "No, you don't. You love the security I provide. You love having a backup plan. But you don't love me enough to be honest with me, and you don't respect me enough to give me a choice about what I wanted to do with that information." She tried a different approach, moving closer to me on the couch. "We have 15 years together. Doesn't that mean anything?" "It means everything, which is why what you did is so devastating. Then fight for us. Fight for what we built together." I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the neighborhood where everyone now knew our business, where the carefully maintained facade of suburban perfection had been shattered by the truth of what had been happening behind closed doors. "I did fight for us," I said without turning around. "I fought for us every time I ignored my instincts and trusted your explanations. I fought for us every time I called your parents' house and accepted their lies. I fought for us every time I chose to believe you instead of believing the evidence that was right in front of me. That's not the same thing. I turned back to face her. You're right. It's not. Because I was fighting for something real, and you were fighting to maintain a lie. Noelle's mask finally slipped completely, revealing the desperation underneath. So, that's it? You're just going to throw away everything we had? I'm not throwing anything away. You already destroyed it. I'm just refusing to pretend it still exists. She stood up abruptly, her tone shifting from pleading to angry. Fine. If you want to be stubborn about this, if you want to make everything public and humiliate everyone involved, that's your choice. But don't pretend you're some innocent victim in all this. What's that supposed to mean? It means you weren't exactly husband of the year. It means maybe if you'd paid more attention to your wife, if you'd made an effort to keep our marriage interesting, I wouldn't have needed to look elsewhere. So this is my fault? This is both of our faults, but I'm the only one trying to fix it. You're not trying to fix anything. You're trying to avoid consequences. There's a difference. Noelle grabbed her purse and headed for the door, her brief attempt at reconciliation over. I hope you're happy with your revenge, Graham. I hope it was worth destroying so many lives. I didn't destroy anything. I just stopped pretending that what you destroyed was still intact. After she left, I sat in my living room thinking about the conversation. Part of me had wondered if I'd been too harsh, if there was some way to salvage something from the wreckage of our marriage. But listening to her try to minimize and justify what she'd done, watching her attempt to manipulate me into taking responsibility for her choices, confirmed that I'd made the right decision. The woman I'd been married to for 15 years was gone, if she'd ever really existed at all. What remained was someone capable of elaborate deception, someone who viewed other people as supporting characters in her own story, someone who would say whatever she thought would get her what she wanted. 2 days later, I received a call from Rebecca Martinez with news that brought a sense of finality to everything. The settlement negotiations are complete, she said. Noelle has agreed to all our terms. All of them? You keep the house, the majority of the shared assets, and she's agreed to reimburse you for the money she spent on the affair. In exchange, you agree not to pursue criminal charges for the workplace fraud. What about Dennis? That's between him and Patricia's attorney. But I understand he's agreed to a similar settlement. Patricia gets everything. He gets to avoid prosecution. And Judith? Walter's divorce is proceeding. She'll face significant financial consequences, but no criminal charges. I hung up the phone and walked through the house that was now officially mine alone. 15 years of shared life, reduced to legal documents and asset division. But for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe freely. That evening, Patricia called to check in. How are you doing with everything? She asked. Better than I expected. You? Same. It's strange, isn't it? How relieved you can feel about losing something you thought you wanted to keep. I keep thinking about all the signs I missed, all the times I chose to trust instead of investigate. Don't do that to yourself. We trusted the people we were supposed to be able to trust. The fact that they betrayed that trust says something about them, not about us. Any regrets about how we handled it? Patricia was quiet for a moment. I regret that it had to happen at all, but I don't regret exposing the truth. They made their choices, and they got to live with the consequences. That seems fair to me. After we hung up, I realized she was right. The past 6 months had been devastating, but they'd also been clarifying. I'd learned who I could trust and who I couldn't. I'd discovered that I was stronger than I'd thought, capable of facing difficult truths and taking decisive action. Most importantly, I'd learned that protecting myself from painful realities wasn't worth living in a world built on lies. The alibi house was empty now, its function obsolete. Walter had put it on the market, unable to live with the memories of what had happened there. Judith had moved to a small apartment across town, her social circle evaporated, her reputation in ruins. Dennis was living in a different state, starting over with nothing but the clothes he could fit in his car. And Noelle had moved in with a friend, her real estate career over, her carefully constructed life dismantled piece by piece. As for me, I was learning to live alone in a house that had once been filled with lies, but was now filled with truth. It was quieter than before, but it was honest. And after everything I'd been through, honesty felt like the most valuable thing in the world. The story was over, the reckoning complete. Everyone who had participated in the deception had faced consequences proportional to their involvement. The network of lies had been